Welcome to the Josh Gerben Show, because law school didn't teach business.
Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of the Josh Gerben Show. Welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. This is the show where we talk about the business of being a lawyer, the business of our profession. If you watch the first couple episodes, you know that I'm a big believer that lawyers are not thinking about all the business items that come in with practicing law on a day-to-day basis. And we miss out on opportunities for growth and more fulfilling practices by just focusing on practicing law and not focusing on practicing business. So in today's episode, I want to talk about something that has really made my law firm over the years, and that is the use of flat fees. So most lawyers hear flat fees and they go, oh no, the billable hour's dead. How am I ever going to make money again, right? I was doing so well with the billable hour, now these flat rates, and it's so difficult to make money. I think if you're using flat rates properly, you should be making 2 to 3 times your billable rate because you're billing for your value and you're no longer having to bill for your time. So let me say it again because I think it's so important. If you're using flat rates properly, you should be making 2 to 3 times your hourly rate when you're properly implementing a flat rate program at your firm. And on the other side, for clients, it's a great deal because now they're paying for the value of the services rather than just some random amount of time that it takes you to get their work done. So clients love it because they can come in and say, okay, this is going to cost $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, and I know exactly what I'm getting for that money, and I don't have to worry about how long the lawyer is taking to think about it, how long it takes the lawyer to sit there and draft an agreement or draft a letter. It's just, this is the value of what I'm paying for. So when we're talking about flat fees, I think it's really important to know that I'm not saying you should just throw out the billable hour and forget it and you'll never use it again. I think the billable hour has its place still, okay? Because there's certain things that it's very difficult to offer flat fees on. But there is a lot of places in your practice that you could probably implement flat fees, and my challenge to you is to start thinking about it. So in our firm, I've been a big believer in flat fees since day one. However, we to this day still bill hourly things because of the nature of what we need to do for our client. So I think there's 2 different categories that we can sort of lump legal services into. One is services that do not have an adverse third party, right? So they're not litigation, there's just sort of you and the client trying to get things done. And then the other is sort of litigation or enforcement or any kind of adverse third party situation. The first category is a lot easier place to develop a flat fee program. So if you have a practice where you have things that you're doing for clients that do not require having an adverse third party involved, this is a great place to start trying to figure out a flat fee program. So obvious places would be wills, trusts, and estates, intellectual property like myself, trademarks, copyrights, patents, corporate attorneys. I'm thinking employment agreements, employment manuals, terms and conditions, privacy policies. There's all sorts of things that your clients may need that you can just develop a flat rate around. So I would highly encourage you to sit here as we're talking about this today and jot down a few things that you might be able to develop a flat fee for. This is a crawl, walk, run process, right? If you have never experimented with flat fees before, you're not just going to jump in and make everything you do a flat rate. You're going to have to find one thing and say, you know what, I'm going to start offering this as a flat rate. And then as you're talking to your clients, your existing client base, you say, hey, you know what, we came up with this flat rate to do X, Y, or Z, and we think your company could really benefit from it. Do you want to give this service a try? And once you start there, now you can start developing more and more things, because what will happen is as you develop the flat fee program and as you figure out what to bill for it, what the holes in it are, and you start getting it all situated, then all of a sudden you'll want to do more and more of it because you'll be making really good money if you're charging appropriately. And we'll get to that in a second. Now, the other place you could consider flat rates is when there is an adverse third party. Now, look, I think complex litigation, really any kind of litigation, very difficult to do flat fees for because you have this sort of unknown as to how far the case is going to go. But I think you could offer flat rates for the initial phases because the majority of times litigation settles, right? And if you file the lawsuit or you send a cease and desist letter, you may start the process of negotiations for settlement. And you can develop flat rates around needing to send that letter, needing to file that lawsuit, needing to start settlement discussions. For example, you could say, hey, to file a lawsuit or to send a demand letter plus having 3 hours of settlement discussions is going to cost X, Y, or Z, right? So you don't have to include the whole litigation. You say, look, we'll take it from this and we'll tack on an extra couple of hours of time to, see where we can get the case before it gets into anything major like discovery. And then we'll kind of reevaluate at that point. But at least if the person knows they're paying $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, right? And they say, this is the cap on it right now. And we'll evaluate once we spend this money and this time. That flat rate might enable you to get some cases off the ground that otherwise you wouldn't, because you might sit there and tell a client, oh, this is going to be a $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 matter. This could be $100,000 or more. Most clients are going to, okay, maybe I don't want to do that. Now, they need to know that the case can get that far, right? But by initially kind of talking about, hey, we can just start this and we can spend a limited budget and get this done, a lot of times it's going to be very helpful for a client to get a case started or to at least start working on a matter. So now that we've talked about where we can find the flat rates to do, let's talk a little bit about the execution of them, because I think there's some very critical things to get right if your flat fees are going to work. So there's 4 main areas that I think you need to think about when developing a flat rate program. The first is, are you truly an expert and really understand the particular field of law? Okay, I've got 60,000 plus hours in on trademark things. If you send me a trademark question, boom, almost instantaneously, I know the answer. If I look at a trademark filing or an office action or anything associated with, a trademark application, I can pick out the issue almost within a couple of minutes. Okay, so if I'm actually charging people by the hour for that, I'm never going to make a living because I'm just too quick, right? But that is to my advantage when it comes to charging flat rates, because if I'm extremely efficient, if the attorneys in my firm are efficient, we can charge very reasonable rates, get really good work done, and make good money. So when you're deciding what you should do a flat rate program on, you need to make sure it's something you really understand and you don't have to take a lot of time to learn all the intricacies of the area of law. So for example, let's say we're going to do a privacy policy or terms and conditions of a website. Of course, you're going to want to have some templates, right, depending on various different types of clients you're going to have. Then you're going to want to know all the issues that go into these things so that when a particular client comes to you and you do some intake, so you'll probably have a questionnaire and say, hey, these are things we're considering when we're developing your terms and conditions. These are things we're considering when we're thinking about your trademark or patent filing. And they fill out a questionnaire, or they answer your initial questions, you can spot the issues really, really quickly. You don't have to sit there and think, you know what, I'm not so sure what we're going to do about this. I need to go research that. You're already losing money, right? So you need to be really sure that you understand the area of law extremely well. And this may not be everything you practice. That's why I say it's a crawl, walk, run. Pick the one thing you know you can do super efficiently, and start there. So the second thing you want to think about when you're charging flat rates is we want to have good systems in place. This kind of goes along with the first point of needing to be efficient. But for example, in my firm, when we offer a flat rate, there can be 4 or 5 people that have to touch a particular matter to get it done. So if we're not efficient in how we're sharing information and how we're moving the matter from person to person through the firm, we're going to lose money, right? So if you are going to be a solo practitioner, just do the work yourself, you should think about systems that can make you more efficient. So emails that are set up to clients that you're going to use throughout the process that might be templated. Or you may have different checklists that you use to move things quickly through the process. But if you're going to include other people, like attorneys or paralegals in the process, there needs to be a systemization toward what you're doing, right? And so that is just so important here, because when you're talking about flat rates, again, our goal as attorneys now is to keep our time down, which is kind of the opposite of what we're used to doing. What we're used to doing is saying, oh, I'm going to think about this, I'm going to research, not in a great rush, right? That is something that I think a lot of attorneys need to start thinking about differently, because now all of a sudden, it's how quickly can you move through this with still doing a really good job for the client. The third rule that you need to think about when you're starting your flat rate programs is charging enough. And this, I think, is super difficult to do, because a lot of attorneys, when we start actually value billing and billing for our value and not our time, have no clue what to charge. Most attorneys I know will say, well, this will take me about 3 hours. My hourly rate is $400 an hour, so I'm going to charge $1,200, and then I'll see how close I get. And that is the exact wrong way to think about it. Because if all you're doing is essentially billing hours when you're offering flat fee services, we got this all backwards, right? Again, we're trying to make 2 to 3 times your hourly rate when you're doing a flat rate program because you are so efficient and so good at what you're doing that that's the value. So when you're setting the price for your flat rate service, you should probably use the initial calculation. What is my hourly rate? How many hours do I think it's going to take me? And double it. See where you are. See if it sells, because the marketplace is ultimately going to tell you how well you're priced. My flat rates have changed numerous times over the 11 years we've been in practice, okay? I started out at a pretty low rate because I was a pretty new attorney and pretty new at what I was doing. And now, like I just mentioned, we've got so much time and expertise on trademark matters that if you're going to come to our firm, you're coming to us because you value our expertise and experience, and we're going to charge for that. Now, I'm still a lot less expensive than most standard major law firms because we have such efficiency in our process and we're so good at what we do that we can move the work quickly enough, we can do it really well, and our fees that we have to charge to do that are very reasonable. And that's where you get into a winning situation. Okay? But if you're not going to charge enough for your flat rates, you may as well stay billing at the hourly rate, because the goal with a flat rate program is to be a value biller. Remember that, value billing, so important here. So when you're coming up with your flat rate price, you may have to experiment a little bit, okay? You may start somewhere and see what the reception is amongst your clients. And if it's not great, maybe you adjust it back. If you have a lot of interest and a lot of people are signing up, you probably need to raise the cost from there. Always be evaluating the price and always be evaluating how much time you're spending to deliver the ultimate product. So that if you are spending too much time, you need to raise the price. If you're spending very little time and you're getting a great result, now it's time to figure out the next thing you can charge a flat rate for. And then the fourth and final tip I have about flat fees. You need to set limits in the engagement form. This is incredibly critical because most attorneys will tell you that if they've charged a flat rate and lost money, it's because the client kept them on the phone 2 hours every time they called, or because the matter spiraled out of control and there was all this back and forth and they, it just took them forever and nothing ever closed. It went on for 2 years and it was a huge loss. To prevent that, the flat rate needs to have boundaries. So in our practice, we tell clients with our flat rate for a single trademark filing, we typically offer a half an hour phone consultation. This way here, if we do a consultation and the client just goes on for 30 minutes, once that call is over, I may send an email that says, just so you know, we've hit the 30-minute maximum on our consultation time. However, I'm still going to give you another call if you have other questions, but once we get beyond that, we would start to get outside the flat rate. So I'm delivering a client service, right? Because I'm not saying, I'm just cutting you off at the 30 minutes and now you got to pay me. I'm saying, look, I'm going to have flexibility here, but I have a limit, right? So you've kind of exceeded and pushed the limit. We're going to let you go above it. But beyond that, now we're way outside the scope, so we're going to have to adjust and start charging a little differently. And the great thing about that is that most of our clients really respect that. They'll say, oh, you're right. Okay, no problem. And then the communication gets a lot more efficient, right? So instead of someone wanting to yammer on the phone all day long, they realize that you're still accounting for your time and they still have to respect your time and they're going to have to pay for it if they don't. So having those limits, another example of a limit would be, hey, if this matter doesn't close in 6 months, we're going to have to reevaluate where we are on fees because we can, for this fee, take it and negotiate it for 6 months. But if it doesn't close, then we're going to be outside that flat rate. Again, you're still providing great value to the client because you're giving the client parameters as to what you're charging for, and they understand the value of what you're providing and the time constraints in which you need to provide it to deliver that cost. So this is really important to make sure it's in the engagement agreement and also discuss with the client. You don't just slide these terms in necessarily. You need to go to the client as you're engaging and saying, here's the parameters of how you should think about this flat rate. Here are the limitations of the flat rate and why. And I'll always let you know before we get there so there's no surprises, right? You want to make sure you're being very upfront with the client, especially as the process is moving forward. But set those limitations and make sure you're constantly reminding the client of where they are so that if you get there, you don't end up in a place where you're starting to lose money. So I hope you enjoyed today's discussion about flat rates and how you might be able to make them work for your firm. I'm going to leave you with 3 quick hitters, things I've learned over the years in my practice where we charge a lot of flat fees. The first is expect a trial and error period. Okay, you're not going to get this right the first time you put out a flat rate, the first time you start charging a flat rate for a particular service. You're going to see holes in the ship, right? There's going to be leaks at spring, and you're just going to have to deal with them. So remember, it's trial and error. Do not get dissuaded. You should be value billing in today's world, and you should be making a lot more money by value billing than billing by the hour. So do not get dissuaded, but expect the trial and error period. The second quick hitter here is you need to think about selling packages and not just a particular service. So if you're going to offer terms and conditions, a privacy policy, a trademark filing, you're not just telling the client, oh, it's $3,000 for a privacy policy and terms and conditions. You need to come up with a package of everything you're including and present it. So it could be presented in a really nice PDF file that you send over. It could be a page on your website where maybe there's even a video of you explaining the service and everything that you're including. But it's not just, this is the service, this is the price. It has to be, you're now selling a product, okay? So you have to package the product. Make it look really good. This is marketing. And you need to really explain to the client everything you're putting into it so they feel that value and it justifies the price. So being able to properly market and package the flat rate service is extremely critical. The final point you need to consider is taking the fees in up front. I think that there's always a huge problem in chasing fees as lawyers, right? Once we do something that's kind of an intangible thing, client gets the work done, and now you've got to chase them for the fee. That is just bad business. If you're charging a flat rate, it enables you to collect it up front, or I would suggest at least 2/3 up front, not a half, 2/3. We collect most of the flat rates we charge completely up front. For the work that we don't charge up front on, that's the only work I never get paid on, right? And it happens. I strongly suggest collecting as much as you can up front and explaining to the client why you do. My explanation, which is completely genuine, is that we do not have the office staff to chase down people for payment. If we had to hire those people, our fees would be higher. So by keeping our administrative burden low and getting it all out of the way at one time in the beginning, we keep our rates extremely competitive compared to other law firms with similar expertise. And I think if you position it like that for folks, they truly understand. And again, if you feel that for whatever reason in your relationships you can't charge the full flat fee up front, I think at least getting 2/3 is absolutely critical. So thank you for joining us for today's show. I hope you enjoyed the discussion here about flat rates. If you did, please subscribe to the YouTube channel or subscribe to the podcast and leave a comment, leave a rating. Very important for me to see the feedback on this and try to put the show in a place where everybody's getting some value. And of course, if you know of anybody that would like the show, please pass it along. We're trying to get the word out, so anything you can do to help me get the word out would be fantastic. Thank you again so much, and I'll see you at the next show.